Still trying to figure out what that noise was. My wife and I went to Kyoto last year and stayed at an Airbnb in Higashiyama. It was a nice, cozy, two-story home, has 2 bedrooms, and it's a mix of rustic and modern. The stairs can only accommodate one person coming down or going up. It's in a quiet urban district, but that's probably typical of any Japanese community. We were the only tenants there at the time. We stayed there for one night. It offered us a good night's sleep. I remember it was a bit cold, as it was during the fall, and our beds were right by the window, but nothing the wall heater couldn't fix. The room we stayed in particular, I hate to make movie references, but it reminded me of the movie The Ring. The landlord did an excellent job with the traditional renovations, tatami flooring. It has a vintage tube TV in there, which easily helped make that comparison. A couple of zabuton floor cushions and a small table, shelves with tea sets. It's hands down rustic, and we loved it. On the day we were getting ready to leave, at around 8 in the morning, I remember packing all our stuff. I didn't know where my wife went, and I assumed she was still upstairs as I can hear her heavy footsteps on the second floor. I called to her asking if she can grab our coats and bring them on her way down when she responded from the same floor, only in the washroom next door by the kitchen. She told me to go instead as she was brushing her teeth. I sat in the living room for a good while, trying to make sense of what I just heard from up there. I've never had an experience before. Not even sure it was an experience, so I tried to come up with rational explanations. It was clearly footsteps, and I don't have a hearing problem. I told my wife about it, and she gave me 4 possible explanations. 1. Rats. 2nd, the wind blowing. 3rd, the wood creaking. And 4th, the people next door. Now you're probably wondering the same, as none of those can possibly come close to sounding like footsteps, and I mean heavy footsteps. The neighbor I tried to accept, but the sounds came from directly above the living room where I was. They're not stomping sounds, just normal footsteps, as if someone is in a hurry, trying to go about the room, trying to decide what to wear. We weren't on edge during all this, probably because the sun's already out. We're both skeptics and we're on vacation. Before leaving, we decided to check the other vacant room upstairs next to ours. Nothing unusual. Just a bigger room than ours with kokeshi dolls neatly arranged on the floor by the wall. Still not sure, but creeped out at best. Gypsies Graveyard. I live about 10 minutes from a haunted graveyard called Gypsies Graveyard. Everyone has different experiences here, but the most common one is a trail that appears to some people that takes you back into the woods where the actual graveyard of the gypsies were buried. Or you will see a light of some sort in the woods, like someone is walking to you, but then it just disappears. I've had a few different experiences here, but the one that creeps me out is of me and 2 of my friends decided one night to go to this graveyard because my one friend didn't believe the stuff that happened here, and also she just got a new car and wanted to go driving. The way the cemetery is, it's on a back road, and the road kind of goes down a hill right before getting to the cemetery and goes upwards right after. We decided before getting these that we would drive past one to see if anyone was there. This is a small cemetery that has a few spots across the street to park. As we approach the spot on the road where the cemetery starts, the car dies with no warning. Nothing worked, no headlights, and no radio. The car just kept coasting, and since we were going down a hill, the car coasted past the cemetery till we got completely past it, when all of a sudden the car started up again. We thought it just had to do with something wrong with the car, so we keep going down the road a little further and have no issues. We decided to turn around and go back and stop since we've seen no cars parked there. But as we get back to where the cemetery starts, the car does the exact same thing. And as we are passing, we see what looks like a girl in a dress standing on the side of the road. It was too dark to make out any facial features, but the moon lit it up enough to see her. As we coast past and make it to the other end of the cemetery, I look back, as I was in the back seat. The girl was gone, and the car started back up again. My friend that didn't believe now believes and refuses to go there. I went back the next night with different people and had stuff happen, but the car dying and starting again and the little girl are the creepiest so far. Childhood experience. Growing up, I absolutely hated being home. At night, it always sounded like someone was walking around, and there were whispers from my closet whenever it was left open. I always made sure it was closed, but most mornings it would be partially open. I would refuse to go into the basement even during the day, and you could never escape the feeling of something watching you. I'm talking full-on blankets over the head, nose poking out type of childhood. One night in the summer, we had a powerful thunderstorm roll through. I remember it vividly because the lightning was near constant, and instead of white and blue, the colors were more purple and green. The storm took out the power. My father asked me to go to the kitchen and help get the candles and flashlights. I was walking down the dark hallway when something jumped out from the bathroom. The kitchen door was 5 feet behind it. Thinking it was my dad trying to scare me, I laughed and said, "Nice try." There was a loud growl, and my father put his hand on my shoulder from behind me. He pulled me back into the living room, closed and locked the door while saying that it wasn't him, and he saw it too. The growling continued from the kitchen entryway for a good 10 minutes, and it sounded like something was pacing the hallway. Dad and I spent the night in the living room. We didn't sleep. We just watched the door. We moved a few months later. The house we moved to felt good. I had no issues with feeling watched or hearing things. Felt like I could sleep without the blankets over my head. Years later, when my father was diagnosed with cancer, we started watching the ghost shows on cable TV. That got us talking about that night and what we saw. It was then my father revealed that the house I grew up in was an old renovated funeral home. The way the house was renovated, my closet was the mechanical room for the lift to bring the bodies from the basement embalming room to the viewing room on the first level. Our floor was the funeral director's private living space. My father's aunt actually owned the house and lived on the first floor, which was the floor where they would have had the viewings and such. The house has changed hands to cousins of mine. Talking with them, they said they had similar experiences: scratching on the wall, footsteps, banging on the basement bulkhead, and lights that would come on dimly as if they were connected in series, rather than each light being its own circuit. They even told me they won't go into the basement alone because the stairs go down past a walk-in storage room with no lights, and they swore they hear breathing and or growling when they went past. They have since moved from that house also. Hell House. I live on a small island in the Caribbean, so please excuse me if my English isn't standard US English. I was 17 years old at the time, just about to turn 18. I'm 25 now, and in my final year of secondary school, our equivalent of high school. My parents and I just moved into a new house that was a couple of minutes away from my school. The house was thousands of dollars cheaper to rent than our last home, so of course we jumped at the opportunity because of the savings, obviously. This house never felt like home to us. Even though we'd unpacked everything and had pretty much set up everything in the house exactly how we wanted it, We just never felt settled. It had a very sad feeling about it. Not a feeling I could ever properly explain. Anyway, as school was now so close to home, I decided I would just walk to school and back home every day. Things were fine at first, aside from the weird chill we'd experienced in the house, which we had attributed to it being on a low-lying piece of land. Our neighborhood was basically a bowl, and our street was at the very bottom of that bowl. About 3 weeks into living in that house, whenever I would be walking down the street to get home, I would see shadows moving about in the living room. Of course, being the skeptic I am, I just assumed it was shadows from the trees in the yard, not thinking anything more of it. That was until the day I left school for lunch and decided to go home and have what we'd made for dinner the night before. I take the food out of the fridge, plate it, and go to nuke it in the microwave, and as I close the microwave door, there's a reflection of a shadow over my shoulder. Just a head. No facial features. Dark enough that I couldn't see through it. I get spooked and run out of the house and up to the end of my road. I reluctantly turn around to look at my house, and my dogs are barking like crazy into the kitchen, and I'm seeing the same shadows moving about the living room. I go back to school, leaving the house completely unlocked, and stay there until one of my parents are home. I explained what happened, and of course they don't believe me, and I get scolded for leaving the house open. That weekend, I'm lying down on the couch in the living room with my dog watching TV. My dad comes stomping down the hall from his room and starts shouting at me about, "Why were you knocking on my door so much?" Well, it wasn't me, and it wasn't my mom because she was out at the mall. Dad is now visibly spooked and tries to shrug it off as the wind rattling the door. The next day, Mom and I are home alone because Dad had to go to work because of an emergency. We're in the master bedroom of the house watching a movie, and we hear what seems to be Dad's voice call out my mom's name, in a tone as if to let us know, "Hey, I'm home." So Mom shouts back out, "We're in here." No response. Mom calls out my dad's name. Still no response. Mom has a short temper, so she gets up and goes outside to see why Dad isn't responding, and I hear her shout out my name. I go outside to see my mom looking terrified, and I ask her what happened, and she explains to me that as she got to the living room, she realized that Dad wasn't actually home, and that she'd seen what looked like a shadow dart across the kitchen. We lock up the house and go for a drive until Dad gets back home. She calls my dad and explains what happened. Now they both believe what I told them a few days back. The next week begins, and no incidences occur until Thursday. It's the same thing. One of us hears the other call out our name, but of course the person we hear isn't home or they're asleep. This persists for days on end. I should note that as all this is happening, my room, which is the lowest part of the house, continues to feel colder and colder. A couple weeks pass again, and I invite a girl I was seeing over to spend the weekend. We go for a drive and for a couple of drinks. Our alcohol laws are pretty lax here. And we get back home. She crawls in the bed while I get changed to settle in for the evening, and as I'm walking towards the bed, I look at her and she's petrified. She tries to get a word out, but she stutters and starts screaming. I try to get her to calm down, but she's pushing me away and she finally gets out, "Something is on you!" Apparently, what she's seen is a shadowy figure wrapped around me, almost like it was piggybacking on me. We spend the night in the living room with my dogs. My family and I only lived in this house for just over 2 months. The events that you're about to read all took place within the last 3 weeks we lived there. We're a family of animal lovers, so naturally we had a lot of pets. A couple macaws, parrots, small cage finches, a squirrel, a few dogs, turtles, a snake, and I had a collection of large insects. There was a patch of grass in the backyard next to my room that never grew, and if anything grew, it just died so quickly. Even when we planted small fruit trees, they'd just shrivel up and die within a couple of days. I guess you could say we made the mistake of putting out some of the caged birds in squirrel cages out there one day. We come back out later that day to bring them back inside, and they're all dead. All the animals we kept to the front and sides of the houses were fine, but the ones we put out back earlier that day just dropped dead. We were convinced at that point that something was seriously wrong with the land we were on. My mom and dad experienced a lot of audible and visual things, but not nearly as much as I did. And other than knocking on doors, they never experienced physical things. Nothing enough to really shake them up more than they'd already been. Then what we refer to now as our day of hell happened. We're all in the living room having dinner, watching TV, and we hear all the cupboard doors in the kitchen start slamming shut. They were already shut as far as we knew, so we get up together and look into the kitchen to see the doors opening and slamming shut on their own. Mom starts crying because she's terrified, and Dad is terrified as well, but he starts cussing into the air because he doesn't know what else to do. We all huddle together, and we collectively hear murmuring in our ears and start seeing shadows darting across the house. We all bolt outside. The dogs are going crazy. The birds are squawking like they're being attacked. Our neighbors hear the commotion and come out and see the state we're in. They invite us in for us to calm down. Mom eventually gets it together enough to call a medium friend of hers, and she, the medium, is able to come pretty quickly. The medium reaches, and at this point, surprisingly, I'm still skeptical as all hell about mediums. Dad and I are atheists, I guess, if you had to label us. I really think they're full of crap most times. Anyway, she walks up to our entrance door, which is by the kitchen, and she stops abruptly and turns to us and says, "You all need to leave here as soon as possible." She doesn't even want to go inside. She just gives us some sage and some other weird things to take inside to use to help to try to calm whatever's happening. She says she's going to do some research on our neighborhood and get back to us, but for the time being, use what she gave us and stay out of the house. We don't have anywhere else to go, obviously, so we just hunker down and stay the night in there. I sleep in the master bedroom. Mom sleeps in the spare bedroom, and Dad stays in the living room, as that's where things seem to be most active, so he wants to be alerted first if anything weird happens. It's a relatively quiet night. I'm completely unable to sleep, so I just scroll through my social media and then I try to force myself to sleep. I just lay there closing my eyes, hoping that I'd pass out eventually. And then I start to hear murmuring in my ear. I can't even say that it sounded like somebody was whispering in my ear. It sounded like it was in my ear. So I freeze up, hoping it would just stop. It does stop, but the room goes eerily quiet. Kind of like what it sounds like when you have on noise-canceling headphones, but don't have music playing. Dead silent, but with a quiet tinnitus ringing underneath. And suddenly, I hear a loud booming voice. "My home," directly into my ear. I'm getting goosebumps just typing this out. I am petrified at this point, and I can't even open my mouth to shout out. I then feel my legs go ice cold and get the sharpest burning sensation on my right foot. I manage to move my arm and grab my phone and call my dad. He bursts into the room and flips on the lights to see a shadow zooming across the room. He starts cussing at it again. It disappears, and the animals outside start freaking out. I get up, and Mama's already in the hallway, and we go into the living room and turn on all the lights, only for her to notice my rubbing my foot, and she looks at it and starts sobbing because there's a visible bite mark on the top of my foot, and underneath it, almost like something tried to take a chunk out of it from the side. We wait out the night, and the very first thing the following morning, we call the landlord to let them know that we will be leaving in the morning, and we'll call moving company and leave right away. Luckily, rental houses are easy to find in our country, so we moved into another house the following day. It was the most chaotic, abrupt move of house we had to do, but it had to be done. A couple weeks later, we get a call from that medium. She did her research about the area that Hell House was built on, and it turns out that, back in the days of slavery, that entire lot of land is where they hung slaves. And it's apparently where a lot of witch doctors and other occults would go to do their rituals before it was developed into a neighborhood. I've not experienced anything ever since. What was she? I went out on my back porch one night, probably around 11 or so once my son went to sleep. I usually did this every night to relax before bed. We live in a small town, but I'm pretty much central to everything, and there's a chain pharmacy behind and to the right of my house. Right beside it is a garage with a big light over the doors and an alley that runs between two buildings. The garage doors are roughly 500 yards from where I'm sitting. Other than the light above the garage, everything is dark. I'm just chilling and enjoying the quiet when I see movement coming from the right of the alley. I see this girl. From the distance I'm at, she looks around early 20s. She's kind of slowly lurching up the alley toward the store, kind of the way the doctor in The House on Haunted Hill moves, jerky and just wrong. She's wearing these bright day-glow green shorts and a fluorescent pink crop t-shirt, really 80s looking stuff. This was in the late 90s. And she's barefoot with her light brown hair in a messy, slept-in looking ponytail. Keep in mind, I can see all this so clearly because the garage light is so bright. But something's just wrong about her. The way she's moving, the way she looks, everything. I figure she's probably on something, but I'm a safe distance away, sitting in total darkness behind a chain link fence, so I'm good. So she's kind of shuffle jerking along till she gets right under the light and just stops. She stands there looking straight ahead, arms just hanging limp and totally still. It was about here that I started to think, this crap ain't right. Then, in one single creepy as F movement, she does this half turn and is looking directly at me. I know there's logically no way she could see me since she was standing under the light and I was in the dark. But I swear this creepy biatch looked right in my eyes. She saw me, I have no doubt. Her face looked like a corpse with its eyes open, no expression at all. My first thought was to just freeze and she'd go away. But something was telling me if I didn't get the hell out of there now, that I was gonna blink and she'd be on the porch right in front of me. Fence or not. I jumped up so fast, the chair fell over and I'm pretty sure I didn't touch the ground again till I was upstairs. I didn't go outside alone at night again for over a year. I never saw her again, thankfully. I don't know what she was, but I do know she wasn't a normal living person. They just can't move like that. Guys, gals, everything in between. If you have any ghost stories, true from like real life experiences, or if you just have something to share, shoot me an email at my email address that's on the screen now, mavakaga@gmail.com. I will, of course, credit you in the story, and I'll read your story on online as well. So let me know if you have any creepy, freaky, even like, doesn't have to be ghost stories, but you know, UFOs or any kind of like weird, fascinating stories you have. Shoot them to me in an email, and I'll make a video about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be doing this a lot more, as there are a lot of people that enjoy these kind of stories. So once again, guys, gals, everything in between, if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe. You'll get notified each and every time that I do post a new video, which is daily. I'll continue to make these kind of videos. I hope you guys all enjoy it. Stay safe, especially in this time of the year. It's pretty bad out there, but let's stay inside, enjoy some stories, and yeah, let's keep each other entertained for as long as possible and as best as we can. We're all a family here. Peace and love. Take care, each and every one of you. For now, Mavakaga, out.